Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, June 9th. Derek Van Riper, Saris here with you on this episode. We have a follow-up. It is a sad follow-up. Corbin Burnes will
Mm.
undergo Tommy John surgery. We'll discuss the implications on Burnes long-term, as well as the short and long-term impact this will have on the Diamondbacks rotation. We did get a minor league promotion that we expected. Chase Burnes got bumped up to AAA. So we'll talk about Burnes and the best pitchers yet to debut currently in the minor leagues. Got some mailbag questions to get to. One detailed one that we're going to focus on a little bit later in the show. And we'll take a look at where the money went this weekend. Eno smashed the FAAB piggy bank for Jack Caglione. We'll discuss why.
You knew I would. You knew I would.
I would be sad if you didn't, based on how often you were bringing him up for the past month.
And then when we did the analysis of like the short sample analysis, I was like, it's all good.
Just cherry picking certain things that are great.
Yeah.
Like this,
Yeah.
and this, all good.
Well,
So
no, the siren song, the thing that speaks to me most, that that tickles me in the ways I like to be tickled, is contact with power.
yeah, contact with power is great.
Huge exit velocities. That was enough for me.
It's fair. I understand. People are excited about Roman Anthony right now for, I think, similar reasons as we await his arrival in Boston. But let's kick it off with the Corbin Burnes news. He will undergo Tommy John surgery, being that we're in the early part of June, forecasting out a 14-ish month sort of timetable. We could see Burnes back around early August, post trade deadline of next season. That's possible. It could take until September. It could cost them all of 2026, depending on how things are going, depending on the state of the Diamondbacks at that time, right? Tons of things we just don't know sitting here today prior to the surgery. As Burnes goes, we've seen changes to his pitch mix. We saw the strikeout rate really drop off, and there's a lot in play, a lot of variables to consider. The sweeper showed up at the end of last season. Uh, what do you make of Burnes's recent performances overall? He looked mostly like himself this year prior to getting hurt. Good ratios, right around that strikeout per inning mark. And the Diamondbacks are clearly going to miss him for some reasons we're going to outline shortly. But this still wasn't quite peak Corbin Burnes last year in Baltimore and even through the first 2 months in Arizona this year.
Yeah, and I think, looking back, these seem to be just a couple clues. I shared a video of him showing off his cutter on social media the other day, and he was saying, that depthy cutter that I liked, that Stuff Plus liked, that he showed late last season. He was like, I don't want to throw that. I can't throw that. And he was saying that, like, he said, like, sort of trying to manipulate the ball to get that depth got him into trouble, quote unquote. I don't know what that trouble is. Is the trouble like mechanical and suddenly you can't command things, or is it trouble like, that hurt?
Right.
And looking back, maybe he has been making some decisions. We were pointing out that the sweeper kind of came and went, and the cutter had this depth and didn't. So I wonder if some of that was like causing his elbow to bark or some way, uncomfortable for him, and that was changing his arsenal, and that was the precursor. That was the hint that we could have had, because there's no hint otherwise. He's an A+ health grade. I don't think he's ever had an injury to anything, maybe other than his hamstring, while we've been recording it.
Nothing major at all for Corbin Burnes. As much of an A health grade pitcher as such a thing can exist, and A health grade pitchers unfortunately break too. So, all the best as he tries to work his way back. Hopefully, we do see him back before the end of next season. I think we always like to see pitchers get back on a regular timetable and then have the opportunity to go through a normal offseason, right? Without the questions of, is he still rehabbing? What does the stuff look like? We start to get a little more of the puzzle, the post-surgery puzzle, if we can get 6, 8, even just a few starts, but a handful of big league starts from Corbin Burnes more than a year from now could tell us a lot about how things are going for him post-surgery.
And a note for those that we sort of brushed by the discussion of whether or not internal brace is maybe inferior surgery. We're all looking at Spencer Strider right now. We know that he had a 12-month recovery time, and that part of internal brace is supposedly to give you shorter recovery times. Trevor Story had a 7-month recovery time on his, and that's pretty good even for a position player. So I am looking right now at it's called Tommy John surgery list. You can Google it. John Rogale, Rogaele, I believe, but he's at MLB player ANALYS analyst. Anyway, he's got this Tommy John surgery list. It has a full list, and then it has UCL internal brace. Jared Jones was the most recent one on here to get it. Trey Cruz, I don't know who that is, but other notable names. Patrick Sandoval, we have not seen him come back yet. Tyler Wells, we have not seen him come back yet. Garrett Whitlock, I don't know if that's a success. Nate Lavender, Landon Marudis, Spencer Strider, Jonathan Loizaga, who's back, I believe, and then hurt again. I don't know.
Back question mark?
TJ Antone, Lucas Giolito, also a 14-month recovery time frame. Brendan Donovan with an 8-month. Drew Rasmussen is the success story, I believe, on the pitching side. Drew Rasmussen looks like new.
Drew Rasmussen's hard work coming back from 3 major elbow injuries is something that we should be inspired by. And then I also feel like if Drew Rasmussen is into science and helping people understand what is actually possible and how and why, I feel like if he's willing, should be part of more scientific study at some point when he's done pitching. What's worked for him? How did this work for him?
Your elbow to science, please.
I'm not asking for a full limb. I'm just asking for a willingness to go in and just get a few extra labs done. I know that, and I don't want to push this into a bad place, but it's man, it could just be getting through the rehab and good surgery and all the perfect combination of factors, but it's possible. That's what I think of when I think of Drew Rasmussen. Hey, it's possible to make it back from all that.
I scrolled down a little bit more, and there are a few more names, and not all are success stories. Again, Nick Anderson had this, and he had 18-month recovery, and he hasn't been the same since, really. Zach Britton, I think that was nearly the end of his career, 2022. And then another success story, Brian Wu had it in college in 2022.
But Wu still had some forearm problems around his big league career too, so he hasn't been completely out of the woods. Yeah, it is a bit of a mixed bag so far. I think
this looks like a worse mixed bag than full Tommy John surgery, to be frank. I'm just doing kind of a visual look at this. So somebody on the Discord, break this down for us a little bit.
By the way, Jonathan Loizaga pitched yesterday on Sunday night.
There we go.
Against the Red Sox. He is in fact back. Yes,
but is he all the way back?
10 innings, 9 Ks, 4.50 ERA. No, probably not all the way back to where he was previously. As far as the Diamondbacks go, this is a team that made it to the World Series in 2023. Zach Gallen was a different guy when that happened, right? We've seen a year-over-year declines from Gallen to the point now where you can't quite pencil him in as that ace or near ace. He's just not that guy. Maybe he gets back to that level, but he hasn't been that guy.
I honestly think, I think you were saying Merrill Kelly is the ace now.
By overall numbers, if you were in an elimination game, your season was hanging in the balance, and you're choosing between Gallen and Merrill Kelly and Brandon Pfaadt and Eduardo Rodriguez, and now Ryan Nelson gets the shot as the 5 with Burnes out. If you're choosing between them based on how they've looked so far this year, and maybe even pulling back and taking a multi-year snapshot, I think there's a good chance you're choosing Merrill Kelly to take the ball out of that group of options.
Yeah. My only pushback is that I think that Gallen and Merrill Kelly, true talent wise, are probably pretty comparable. And so that decision for me would be more about like someone's going better now, quote unquote.
Sure.
I think that Gallen is now just sort of a mid, like a sort of 3 to 4, in real life. And I think that's what Kelly is. I said that's why I think they're really in trouble, is that Burnes was their 1. And now they're choosing between a couple of guys who are like kind of 3s at best right now. And so they can win still, actually, with their offense. When they made it to the World Series, they did not have a great pitching staff that time either, and the Rangers didn't either. So there are still ways for them to win. And I doubt that they'll sell, honestly. But they do, like right now, it's maybe 2 3s at the top with Kelly and Gallen, and then a bunch of like 5s with question marks on them.
It's tough because in the West right now, they're 3 games below 500. The Diamondbacks had a brutal weekend in Cincinnati coming off the Burnes news. Just horrible few days for the organization. 7.5 back of the Dodgers. So they got 3 teams ahead of them in the division. And even in the wild card race, I mean, 3 below 500 in the NL right now puts them a few spots out of the wild card too. And that's with a team like Atlanta, 10 below 500, that we all still expect to make some kind of run. So the next 7 weeks will be critical for them to stay afloat and not be one of the best teams that chooses to sell. I mean, I think if they're, where do you think their playoff odds need to be leading into the deadline for them to justify pushing chips in and keeping the window open? Because we know all you have to do is get there and anything can happen. They've shown that before. But at the same time, you do have to balance short and long term appropriately.
Right now, their playoff odds for the Diamondbacks are 25%. Just to get some comparable ones, the Brewers are at 28%, the Cardinals at 43%, which is kind of amazing because they both have good, decent records. The Braves are at 26%, and the Rangers are at 18%. So I think the Rangers, to me, seem much closer to selling, although they're supposed to get their pitching back this year. This is supposed to be a good year, and there's a lot of stress over there, and they're firing hitting coaches. So I think they want to be in the mix. The Red Sox are supposed to be in the mix. They have an 18%. So I think if they had the same as they have now, 25% later in the season, I think they'd be tempted to not sell at least. But I think if you want to buy, you want to be more in the next group, which is the Padres at 50%, Cardinals at 44%, Mariners at 55%, the Guardians at 40%. That's the tier, I think, that where it all makes sense to buy. So I think right now they're in the don't sell tier, and they have to jump into the buy, and they have to win some games. And I guess right now, what's going to happen in the division is that some of the divisional, interdivisional matchups that haven't happened yet in the NL West are going to start to happen. So the Padres and Dodgers haven't played that much, and they're just about to play like 6 and 9 or something. I think it's something where like the Padres go and play the Dodgers and the Giants and the Dodgers, like, 3 series in a row or something. So, as that happens, things could shake out where the Diamondbacks get up to closer to 50%, maybe buy. But I think if you're at 25%, it's more like let's not sell and let's buy like a reliever no one's talking about. Like,
right? Maybe they'd be quiet buyers instead of aggressive buyers. Like that would be maybe the more likely situation. I mean, I think the way they're built, you look at this team, like it's built around Corbin Carroll. They extended Perdomo. They've got Ketel Marte for a long time. So like some of their core position players are in place for the next several years. It doesn't feel like their window is slamming shut, but some of the questions around the starting pitching sans Burnes are very real beyond the questions about Gallen. I'm with you on the Gallen Kelly being even enough where if the next 10 starts from Zach Gallen are pretty good and Kelly goes through a bumpy patch, you could easily flip your preference for who you'd want on the mound for an elimination game. Eduardo Rodríguez has a 387 Sierra, but a 670 ERA and a 165 whip. He's got
Stuff has never liked him.
Stuff's never liked him. He's got a 56.2% left on base percentage. That's very, very low. and a 367 BABIP. So some
I think he's a
of
soft
that gap is
buy.
bad luck. Yeah, like
I
in
think
deeper
he's
leagues.
actually. I think even in a 12, if you're looking for somebody like, you know, I think he's sort of like back end top 70 starter.
Yeah, it's useful enough for mid-size and deeper leagues. I can buy into that. What's going on with Brandon Pfaadt though? A 17.8% strikeout rate, but I think we maybe compared him to Nick Pivetta back during our position preview series. The thing that Nick Pivetta would always do, even when the ratios weren't good, was strike guys out.
People out.
You knew you were getting a strikeout floor, and that's not even there for Brandon Pfaadt. And for a long time, the issue's been lefties, like having something that works against lefties. But man, the Diamondbacks need to find something else that works for Brandon Pfaadt, because especially without Burnes, the importance of his turn every fifth day just got turned up a few notches.
Yeah, and the sinker thing worked, but it, sinker sweeper against righties is increasingly a package that batters I think are comfortable with, or at least they're seeing a ton of it, so they're not surprised by it anymore. And even in his last game against Atlanta, he didn't even use the sweeper, so. He's sometimes that sweeper goes in and out for him. I think maybe because it is a seam shifted wake pitch. The sinker is not one that, as good as it is, it's not one that's usually there for whiffs. It's a little bit more about soft contact. So I guess the sinker change had the unforeseen consequence for him of reducing the strikeout rate, even as it made him a little better against righties to use that fastball shape. I think he just also never really figured out the lefty thing. This year lefties still have a 485 slugging. Now you can point out, yes, the righties have a 495 slugging, and that is maybe the real problem. But he's just got a limited upside because of his inability to get lefties out. He did it barely for one season and really hasn't ever. His full career slugging against lefties is a 491, and the best it ever was 2024 with a 472. So lefties, he's never figured out lefties. Can you go through your whole career and be a starting pitcher that's just not that good against lefties? I guess, but it's not going to be a 1, 2, or 3. You're more likely a 4 or a 5 in that situation. So he's begging to like throw a splitter or figure something out, a cutter. So I think I would my interest in Pfaadt going forward is like, do you have a new pitch? And if he comes in the spring and says, I've got this new cutter and I'm actually throwing it, I love it, then I'm going to start listening again.
So there's something that's kind of weird in the game log with Brandon Pfaadt. Look at the beginning of the season. It kind of looked like he was turning a corner in terms of command, especially. I think in his first 6 starts, 5 of them had location pluses above 100, and 4 of them were above 110. In the 7 starts he's made since, he's been above 100 once. And in the last 2 starts, he's been at an 84 and a 70. And I'm noticing, if you look at home versus road, his location at home at Chase Field, his location numbers are coming out better than on the road. So is there something about the way the ball feels for him in Chase Field? Like, it's dry there, like the conditions there are a certain way. Like, I can't even begin to unpack it, but it's a very odd thing to see well above average command to begin the season, and now like well below average command just a couple months later.
Yeah. And there's not really a change in pitch mix, a little bit more reliance on the sinker, a little bit more slider usage, but he used to command those pitches well too. And it's gone away. Like the sinker he was like really good with it, and then he's fallen off. The slider, I will say this, goes away and comes back. And he located it really poorly at home against Washington, and then located well on the road against Atlanta, but only used it sparingly. So I would say that weirdness with the slider, where game to game, the location plus on Pfaadt slider goes from 70s to 170s. It's pretty wild. It's a big oscillation there. So I would say that's the problem. Is the sweeper is good, but sometimes he loses it. And so when you lose the sweeper, then you become a guy with a meh fastballs and okay curve and a okay change. Like you'd lose that's his best weapon for swing and miss. So something is going on with the sweeper for Brandon Pfaadt. And it also is just covering over a problem lefties that he has never figured out.
I think someday we need a merch reveal where we're talking about a player that needs to add a cutter, and you just pull a hat out from behind your desk and pull on the hat that just says add a cutter. That should be the merch reveal. Do yoga, learn to code. I think I just saw a story too that too many people learn to code, and it sucks. I don't want to like turn that into a thing. It's bad advice that people give. It's not horrible advice, but it's generally not good advice. And I saw a follow-up story that confirmed that it's not going to lead you to the life that you were hoping for in every instance. But as Brandon Pfaadt goes, probably a deeper keeper league guy that I would take back in a trade as kind of a throw-in just to see where it goes. Because if he were to add a cutter, if he can find a way to command that sweeper more effectively, 2 breaking balls and 3 fastballs would be interesting, right? Like there's something that could be there, but the fact
You'd
that
be like, you're a man,
right? So the long-term outlook is still kind of just okay. Throws innings. That's the thing that I think Brandon Pfaadt brings so far. Hopefully that continues at the very least, take pressure off of that bullpen. Okay, so if you are in the situation of trying to replace Corbin Burnes, it is bad out there. It's been bad trying to find pitching all season long. The deeper the league, the more difficult that is. Maybe your actual help is not even in the big leagues right now. I mentioned up top, Chase Burnes, no E, similar name. Chase Burnes promoted to AAA. His final numbers at AA are stupid. His last start was 6 Ks, 7 scoreless, no walks, 3 hits allowed. So he finishes his AA time with a 1.29 ERA, a .71 WHIP, and a 55-4 strikeout to walk ratio in 42 innings. That is very good. That is very impressive. So I bring this to you. Who is the best pitcher in the minor leagues yet to debut in the majors? This group would include Chase Burnes, Andrew Painter, Bubba Chandler, Jacob Misiorowski. I mean, there's some leagues out there, I know Yahoo leagues are like this, where sometimes you have an NA slot and you can stash away someone with an NA designation, and minor league players have that designation. And if you can only hold one, you have to choose carefully if they're all even available. There's a good chance that other people in your league have these guys rostered. So how do you stack them up? And do you agree that if you're trying to replace Corbin Burnes, you're more likely to catch lightning in a bottle with one of these guys getting promoted at some point than you are finding that replacement on the wire in any given week?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about the wire, we're talking about guys like teammate Ryan Nelson, and you're hoping that he finds something, in his mix, but you doubt, even if he finds something in his mix, that he has that high end talent, like a Chad Patrick. You like him, but my comp for him was, Lance Lynn. So there's not really a Corbin Burnes waiting out there for you unless you kind of go for it on this level. I really like Bubba Chandler's fastball slider combo, and I like his home park. And I think that the change in curve are good enough to give him a wide enough mix that he's going to go in with some similarities to Jared Jones, and that the fastball and slider, forcing fastball slider, are the heart. But he's throwing the other secondary pitches, change in curve more, Bubba Chandler is, than Jared Jones did. So I think it's a wide mix, and it's a great park, and he's the one. I think I might put Jacob Misiorowski second, because the location numbers are not as bad in the minor leagues as you would expect. He supposedly has no command of his four-seam fastball, and yet his fastball location plus in the minors is 103, 104. So I think this could be a situation with like Hunter Brown, where your best framer is in the big leagues, and your best pitching coach is in the big leagues, and your best approach is going to be in the big leagues, and Jacob Misiorowski is going to come up and not have as bad as command as we expect. So that's what I'm going with: Misiorowski second and Bubba first. And Burnes is just coming into a situation in the big leagues where his home park is difficult, and I just think that's harder on a pitcher. Any mistake that Chase Burnes makes could be hit for a home run when it's super hot in Cincinnati and it's August. So that's why I'll put Chase Burnes third.
I do think some workload considerations are kind of intertwined in this analysis too. With Mizorowski, it was 99 and a third innings last year, I think, between Biloxi and Nashville. He's at 63 and a third already. So you have to think they're getting to the point where they're going to think about getting him into the big leagues and maybe deploying him as a multi-inning reliever or doing some creative stuff to keep that workload where they want it.
Which they're already doing with guys like Quinn Priester, and they're using openers, they're using everything they can.
Yeah, so I wonder. I wonder what his workload in the big leagues looks like initially, even though he's showing us a lot in the minors right now. I'm very excited long term. I'm just perplexed short term about what the usage is going to look like. Maybe he's a multi-inning reliever to begin his big league career, and he's in the rotation for all of 2026. Painter, I think, is the guy that I'm very intrigued by. Maybe it's the toughest to fit him into the mix. You get Mick Abel pitching well.
I'm just worried that Mick Abel pitching well. Yeah, so it might need a second injury or a second situation in the because there's not even room for Mick Abel if Aaron Nola comes back when Aaron Nola comes back. So
right, but they've been doing the slow walk plan with Painter all along, probably not coming up until after the All-Star break. I just wonder if they're going to flip the switch and let him be a regular starter when he comes up, because they've been building him up so slowly in the minors this year. I think he's up to 32 and a third innings so far, and he pitched in the fall league a little bit, and it's multi-year layoff, so I think it's hard to come up with the actual number, but the way they're handling him gives you a little more confidence that they're trying to save a lot of innings for.
That's interesting because they do want those innings though eventually, so that he can be a full-time starter next year, right? Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't necessarily want to go where he has 50 innings at the halfway mark and then they bring him up as a reliever and he only gets another 20 innings. That doesn't seem like what they want to do with him.
Would they entertain a 6-man rotation for any part of the year? They're so good. Their depth between Wheeler, Sanchez, Nola, and Luzardo. We talked about him on Friday. He's had a couple of rough outings, to put it mildly.
If they thought that kept Wheeler fresher for the postseason, maybe
keep everybody fresh for the postseason if they're on track to make the postseason, right? I think that's something you really want to consider. And even with their recent skid, 77% chance of making the playoffs, 9 above 500, they should very easily be in that conversation. So I think Painter is the wild card for me, where I'm like, I could see them actually just going 6-man if everybody's healthy, and that could be the way to balance everybody out and keep everybody fresh. And then maybe in the middle of September, pull somebody out, go back to the 5-man, and get everybody kind of back into the routine of the shorter rest.
For the AAA guys that have made it to AAA, we went through and found their stuff plus, and there's Andrew Painter at the very top. 119 stuff plus in AAA, 367 pitches, good sample. The locations, as you can tell from his whip, are not amazing, but they are close enough to 100 that I would say it's not necessarily a problem. You'll see lower location plus numbers from a lot of these guys. Blade Tidwell has the lowest, or some of the lowest. Bobby Miller has the lowest, along with Jack Perkins. They have the worst command. They grade out the worst by pitching plus. And so there are legitimate command issues for Bobby Miller and Jack Perkins. But at the top of the list, Andrew Painter, Blade Tidwell, Nolan McLean, who is a bit of a sleeper. And I think between Tidwell and McLean, you have a case to see that this is a Mets team that is really turned up their development, their pitching development. And, McLean is close. They're, and Tidwell are close. And, with McLean, what I like is it's a full arsenal. That's not just like one stuff plus number, floating the whole thing. His sweeper is 119, his four seam is 113, his sinker is 101, his cutter is 105, and his curve is 125. And so I think this is a full arsenal that's ready to go, and I'd be really excited. So if you hear anything about the Mets calling up any pitcher almost to be a starter, I would circle it, because it's certainly going to be one of McLean or Tidwell, and they're both really interesting. Bubba Chandler 4th, Zebby Matthews 5th. Unfortunately, Zebby has a shoulder strain and is going to be out. And he was just starting to really look like he was putting it together. So that's really annoying. Jack Perkins is in Oakland, and we heard from Jeff Ponce that Oakland is doing something interesting. I recently picked up a Gauge Jump share for $1 in Autonew based on that Jeff Ponce interview. Logan Evans looks like a legit starter, I think. He may be the 6th starter in Seattle right now, but if they change their mind on Emerson Hancock, or if they're, if Bryce Miller succumbs to that surgery because he's pitching with blood spurs in his elbow, I would remember Logan Evans' name. Jackson Wolf is depth in San Diego. He's back in San Diego. I think he's probably a 6th starter in true talent. And there's Cade Horton doing pretty well in the major leagues right now. I don't know that I think that Cade Horton has the ceiling of a Painter or Chandler or any of these guys. But I think he is a major league starter.
Yeah, a lot of interesting names there, and some guys are going to be more like up and down depth types this year and not necessarily be that Corbin Burnes replacement you're looking for, but they're still important names to have on your radar and certainly helpful in deeper formats like Autonew, as you mentioned, because you can start those bids now, stash them away for $1, and have some pitching in the bank for later on when you definitely need it. But I think as far as the rankings go for mine, I'm probably still Bubba Chandler one of that bunch, just because of all the factors we're talking about. So maybe I'm Chandler, Painter, Burnes, Mizorowski for this year. I love Mizorowski. I just don't know how they're going to use him. So subject to change, but 4 guys that could all make an impact depending on when they get that call. You mentioned that Zebby Matthews injury. I assume that opens the door for Simeon Woods Richardson to get back into the rotation temporarily for the Twins as they try and hold it together with multiple starters on the IL right now. Some other news you should know from the weekend: Julio Rodríguez needed help off the field after getting hit by a line drive in the ankle on Saturday. He had x-rays that came back negative, and he played Sunday. So that turned out about as well as you could have hoped after
he got hit by
unfolded.
A batted ball?
Yeah, he got hit by a line drive.
As a base runner.
Yeah, I think that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, that's good news. I guess I hope it's not one of those things that's like he later is like, yeah, why did you slump for all of June? He'd be like, well, I was hobbling around.
Yeah, the way he described it is in the beginning it was very painful. I couldn't really feel my foot a whole lot or move it a whole lot and not even walk properly. But after we started treating it, everything started reacting better right away.
All
It was a
right.
line. Yeah, Randy Arozarena hit that line drive. I didn't see it as it happened, but yeah, Randy Arozarena hit a line drive that hit his leg when he was attempting to steal third base. It's very fluky.
Yeah.
Some other news-related items. Kyle Teel promoted by the White Sox, as expected, I think, on Friday. It sounded like he was close to getting the call. We've just wondered how they're going to balance out the playing time behind the plate, having 2 very good catching prospects, but having the flexibility, I think, to DH or have one of these guys play another position a little bit. Like, this is a good problem to have. I wouldn't look at this as something that necessarily chews up the value of the other player in this situation the way it can where you have a more crowded depth chart and DHing or playing first is a less likely outcome for your second catcher.
I went and got him I have three NFC teams with FAAB. 2 of them got Jack, one for $267 and one for $330. So I went and brought the hammer down because I needed. It's also some teams effects there where one team was just in the bottom and just needed something huge to happen, and the other team, when my main event team, we're now in sort of the top 5 in the league. And the biggest thing we don't have is power. And that's like a really hard thing to like fake your way towards. It's really hard to stream for power because the power hitters are owned. Like the power hitters are the best hitters. So this was our chance to take a team that is pretty good across the board and say, all right, we're now going to probably be in the sort of $3 to $4 territory buying players going forward for a long time. But this is our big chance to get the big thing that we needed. The only other team where I didn't get him, I got Kyle Teel for $60. And the reason that I got Kyle Teel for $60 is because I had Dalton Rushing as my second catcher, and he's not playing very much. He's playing like a backup catcher. Kyle Teel DH'd in the second game. I know this is a tiny little, you're like, oh, in one thing, but he came up, he caught, he DH'd, he caught. And I agree with you, basically, is what I'm saying. That is a team that needs bats. It needs people to be good. It needs to say we made progress. And the best way to do that is to play Teel and Cuero as much as possible. So I think Teel is going to play.
I think you said who's going to play more of the two. I do think Teel plays more. I think he's a more exciting, more balanced all around. Yeah, I think that little tip of the hand, I don't think it's as extreme as what we saw this weekend. I think they're going to find a way. Benintendi DH the 2 games that Teel didn't. Tauchman's in right. Like, how long is Mike Tauchman going to be on this team? Right? Like, you're not going to have him after the trade deadline at least. So that's one path. And
Joshua Palacios is I like him in certain ways, but he's a borderline everyday player. Like he's below replacement for his career so far in 571 plate appearances in 205 games. So he may not be around very much longer.
Right. So if you've got Caro in a deeper league, don't look at what happened this weekend just yet and say, oh no, his playing time's gone. It's just going to take a roster move, I think, or a week or so for them to make some sort of tweaks to move ahead and actually play it the way we think they're going to play it. LaMonte Wade Jr. has a new home. We mentioned on the Friday show that the Giants had DFA'd him. Wade ends up with the Angels. What do you think the playing time situation looks like for him in Anaheim?
I mean, now that Trout is healthy, maybe he's competing with Joe Adell in a weird way. Although Joe Adell's playing center field, and they don't really want to play Trout in center field anymore. Jorge Soler, it's actually pretty crowded. So I don't know what the use case is. He's like very similar to Shadwell, actually. In fact, that they both have really good plate skills, but no power. And I think they're going to play Shadwell. So my guess is LaMonte Wade Jr. is the lefty off the bench.
Yeah, lefty off the bench that backs up in the corner outfield spots, I guess. So not much playing time there. Probably not going to be on your roster outside of AL-only leagues as a kind of bottom-end sort of guy. A couple other notes here. Justin Verlander is going to throw a simulated game on Wednesday as he tries to work his way back from a pec strain. So we'll keep an eye on his recovery. I still think I have a reasonable expectation for Verlander. We were talking earlier about just pitchers that are useful. I mean, you look at Verlander, if Eduardo Rodríguez is useful as a top 75 starter, Verlander is somewhere above that line, right? If I'm choosing between those two, once Verlander's healthy, it's Verlander pretty comfortably, especially given the home park.
Yeah, and I think that in most leagues, you're just looking at the opponents.
Yeah.
And looking at the matchups for these guys. It's a little bit harder, I think, with Eduardo Rodríguez in a way, because with the Verlander, you can be like, hey, if he's at home, immediate boost.
With Erod, you're
home,
like,
not against the Dodgers. You're like, okay, that's it. He's in.
Not the way I feel about Erod, though. So
yeah, I think it's just harder to know when he blows up, right? You're like,
yeah,
is it home that great of place for him to start? I'm starting in Pittsburgh. There we go. We got one.
Got one. There you go. Out of division. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The other news item, Craig Kimbrell DFA'd by Atlanta after making one appearance. Very odd series of events.
I hate it.
Don't bring him back if you're going to do that.
Yeah, this is Kimbrell, man. Like, there's a chance he ends up in the Hall of Fame. And you put him in the minor leagues and like left him there for a while. Like, for a reliever, he was in the minor leagues for a while. And then you had a roster crunch and you just needed a reliever for one game. And this is Kimbrell. like is he like their leader in saves?
I
All
mean,
time.
he'd wear the A on his hat as
He's
a Hall
wearing
of
the A
Famer.
on his head if he gets into the Hall of Fame. And so you bring him back, and everyone's like, "Oh, Kimbrel!" Like I was there the day they brought him back, and they came up to all the reporters and like, "Kimbrel's in the dugout now." That's what happens when someone important comes up. If it's just a regular call up that nobody knows, they do it by the locker. Kimbrel was down in the dugout. You had to go to the same place where you go talk to the manager. So there was pomp and circumstance. We bring him up. He pitches. It's not the greatest inning, but he pitches an inning. And then after the game, they're like, thanks. We're calling up another guy.
We're
I don't like
probably going to have a segment in the near future where we fire up the old Trade Master 3000, which I think has a new name every time I bring it up because I never forget what I called it the last time. And I think in a lot of ways, if Atlanta, if they're sitting even 5 below 500 by the time the trade deadline rolls around, could they sell? That's not in the typical approach of the Alex Anthopoulos Braves, but I think they could talk themselves into moving a few pieces and still like hanging around maybe, but not necessarily being aggressive, like or trying to pull the old let's just get a bunch of guys no one wants and see if we can be right. Like that approach has served them well in the past. So maybe that's where it would go, but I don't know. We're starting to try an ID who the actual sellers are going to be at the deadline that have players their teams would want. And this Atlanta team, because of the contracts, maybe doesn't have a lot of rentals and easy to move players, but they're just going to be in a weird spot at the deadline if their season keeps playing out the way it has up to this point.
Yeah, I guess the easiest moves would be Marcell Ozuna, who's an impending free agent that somebody could be interested in as, pop off the bench or improve their DH situation. I mean, if you paid down some of his money, I'm sure the Padres would love to have Marcell Ozuna.
Yeah, there'd be contenders that want him, and I don't think trading him necessarily means you're waving the white flag on your season either. I mean, you could play Murphy and Baldwin and just move on.
Yeah, and then otherwise, there's not really an obvious choice. I guess Pierce Johnson has a club there's a club option on him, so they could trade him away. But he's been useful, and in fact, right now they're in the middle of upheaval. There's a lot of people circling them, wondering who their closer is because Raisel Iglesias was pulled. Pierce Johnson got an opportunity. I don't actually. I don't know. Like I don't like to say it that way, but I don't know. Like, do you know who their closer is, or do you have an opinion? Is it Dylan Lee, like the lefty?
I've seen some Dylan Lee pickups in my leagues. I don't have a strong lean in that pen so far. I haven't taken any shots in there myself. It's weird. It's a team that has had a bunch of stuff go wrong so far this year, and there's time, but not as much time as you'd like to turn it around, especially with the Mets and Phillies playing so well as the two teams ahead of them right now in the East. The other thing they could do, not to like blow up the future Trade Master 3000 segment, Chris Sale has a club option for 2026. I mean, like if you're going to be good next year, you're going to pick up that club option and he's probably on your team, but I don't know. Chris Sale would be pretty enticing for teams out there looking to bolster their rotation.
That one feels like more of an aggressive, actually selling move if they really think that there are some underlying problems, because I think you could re-rack this team and just be like, hey, next year we'll have like, $50 million that we can spend on pitching. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And let's do better than we did with it last year. And that $50 million is made possible by Ozuna, Iglesias, Rafael Montero. You can do better than that, I think. So they would maybe buy a closer on the market and then buy like a fourth starter, and then whatever money's left over, get like a part-time DH. And then I think probably be better than last year. And specifically somebody like Strider, they'd be like, he's going to be better next year. We have to believe that. And so then you come back next year and you're like, we spend our fringe money, the guys on the fringes, we spend it better, and we're a better team, and we're back in there as a competitive team. And I think that's probably the plan. So if they sell, it's most likely Marcell Ozuna for me. I don't think anybody's like lining up to get Raisel Iglesias right now, but maybe a team would take some of that money off their hands. If they would probably trade Raisel Iglesias. And I don't know that a lot of teams are lining up for Rafael Montero, but similarly. But so I think the big one is Marcell Ozuna. I think that's the one that if they continue to flag, they could actually sell him.
Yeah. And again, not have it be the thing that says, oh, we're giving up on the season. It's like, no, we're just moving a player to shuffle things around and just see if we can get by without him, make a run without him. It wouldn't be impossible for that to happen. We have a mailbag question that actually ties into the where the money went segment because Eno went all in on Jack Caglione, as I mentioned up top. So Mark Morrow Brothers here, got us on the Discord. How do you handle FAAB in a league where you don't know your fellow league owner's track record like in the NFBC? We find this to be one of the hardest things to do each week as bids can be all over the place and we don't want to waste FAAB by overbidding. This week, someone bid 178 on Alex Bregman and the runner-up bid was 27. We did a make good bid on Caglione at 120 and the winning bid was 122, which somehow makes it way more painful than if the winning bid was 190. Do you set a budget each week and just miss those big pickups? Do you drop the hammer on someone like Caglione and go dollar days the rest of the way? How do you approach this in general? And I thought like this was a great question for this week because I feel like you're not usually the person throwing the large FAAB hammer, at least in mixed leagues. I don't label you as a player who plays that way. I think you're usually a little more patient overall on the wire.
I'm used to having basically one player a year where I will do this, where I will go to the mat. And over time that has shifted. Sometimes it's been like, somebody I have great minor league stuff plus on, like I did spend like 170 or something on Taj Bradley when he came up, and so I've modified that one where I am just on pitching way more conservative. And I'm always like trying to get the next, like I'll get my number 2 option for a lot less. That's fine. That's what I've done on pitching. But on hitting, if somebody comes up like this that makes contact hard, and fits a need that the team really, really needs, and fits a team that my team really, really needs, then I'm like, this is all coming together. I got to go for it. And so to his question though, what I would do is, and the way this works for me is like, I've got my main event and I've got a co-owner in JH, and we go through all of our bid numbers. He has a bid number. I have a bid number. We kind of find a middle ground, and we are doing this knowing at what main event prices are, like knowing that a whole hog main event gets your guy is a 330, right? Like we both just knew that. And so we like moved it around a little bit and we won him, 331 to like 316, like we knew what we were doing on the secondary one. So the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational, TGFBI and BARF, that's where more like he's talking about. You don't know how it's going to go. There have been weird ones where there's no runner up on a team. You're like, why? How could there be no runner up on those? I put like a 250. I'm also doing a better place. My team is in a better place. I put like a 250 on Jack, hoping to either I win him for cheap, and I put a 60 on Teel, just knowing that that's like a secondary big bid, and I won Teel 60 to 20. Now, do I feel bad? No. I mean, that's $40 I could have had back. Maybe I should have put a 30 on him or something, but you can't think about that. I think what you do is you establish norms for what you think are, this is the big bid. This is we're taking this guy bid. This is the streamer bid. Is the streamer bid 7 in your league? Is it 6? Is it 11? Find out what the streamer bid is. Is it streamer plus? Mick Abel is streamer plus. Okay, that's like 18 to 21, right? And then what I would just say is make it more about your process. Don't think about the rest. Don't think about the rest of the guys because they're erratic. You won't be able to know it. You can't scout them. You're not gonna figure this out. Even if you could scout them, they would be like, oh, I'm gonna change my bid from a 57 to a 51 because people have been scouting me and I've been doing 7s too much. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is. Like you can't really scout other people. So I would just say make the process about yourself, figure out where your bid levels are, what they represent, and then just go for it. And don't feel badly if you overbid. I don't feel that badly about the 40 missing dollars. I really wanted Kyle Teel.
Yeah, the precision generally doesn't come back to bite you in most leagues. I think if you were going to set a budget every week, say it's a 26-week season or 26 weeks of FAAB, roughly $1,000 budget, that's like $38 a week. And if you overspend for a few weeks, even like let's just say you wouldn't even spend the $38 every week because you probably front load it. By the end of the
Yeah.
season, you'll see good players coming off the IL getting picked up for single digit bids. Like that just happens because no one has money left then. So you do have
You
to
have to think
push
that you're getting
more
more
ahead.
out of them. You have to, yeah, getting more out of them if you win them earlier. So
Right. So if you take that even number and then just tilt the scale to spend double each week at the beginning of the season, knowing you're going to be dollar days in September or
more like
close to dollar days
50s
in
in the early
September,
and 20s late.
that'll generally
Yeah.
be okay. But and like you said, if you're planning on doing this one time or 1/3 of your budget is what you're going to allocate for the high end player that becomes available, usually it's a top prospect getting promoted. Sometimes it's a major injury early in the year. The guy comes back in June or July, and you say, "Oh, okay, I got to throw $200 or $300 at this player because unexpectedly, Alex
For some
Bregman might be an
reason, someone
example."
dropped Jordan Alvarez. Yeah.
Right, or Yordan Alvarez got dropped and he comes back in August. Hopefully, he comes back before then. It's going to cost you a lot, and that's okay to do that one time. But generally, you're looking in increments of like 40 to $50 a week, most weeks, probably split over multiple players. Sometimes I'll push to one guy. That's fine too. It depends on what you're looking for. It might be a 2-start pitcher that has good enough stuff to possibly stick in the rotation. You might spend more on a player like that. That's what I have found to be helpful is having player types and ranges for them based on overall sorts of bid numbers, not specific to your league. I do think you want to keep in mind as the season rolls along, especially or when you're making a big bid, what budgets everybody else has. Like popping open that tab where you can just quickly look up and down. Okay, 5 teams have most of their money left or enough of their money left to throw a giant bid in there. Okay, nudge the bid up on Jack, nudge the bid up on the player we're bidding on this week. That makes a little bit of sense as far as your awareness of the rest of the league. But if you're trying to micromanage everybody else's FAAB decisions, I do think that will eventually backfire on you and make you a little bit less effective in that regard. So hopefully that gives you some guidance as you try and navigate this every week. I mean, that's a pretty low winning bid on Jack in the example that Mark sent us. Like that was a situation where even if you didn't necessarily need him, but you had the budget for it, you could say, well, if I needed him, I'd be at 1/3 of a full budget, the 330 range. I don't really need him, so let me cut that number in half. Let me go 175 or 177. That might have been the more appropriate sort of bid. That was almost like cutting it really thin. I don't know their FAAB situation. Maybe they didn't have a lot more they could spend than the 120s, so that's why it turned out that way. But I would also kind of factor that in: need versus nice to have. Like even the nice to have price on a big player like that, to keep them honest sort of bids, are not going to be insignificant.
I also haven't, I don't know if this is just like a silly thing, but I don't I don't think of my expenditure on Jack as a percentage of my remaining FAB. I don't like to think of it that way. I don't know why. It should be more thought of as a percentage of the overall.
Mhm.
I think that's a small distinction. I think it matters because then you're thinking about him in the context of your entire year and a pickup within the entire year, and not so much being sort of myopic about like this is all the money I have left. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I don't know. I think of it more as, yeah, we're down now. We don't have that much, but we play like this. This is how we play, and this was a 30% outlay, not a 60% outlay. You know what I mean? Even
Right.
though it was 60% of our remaining budget. So I don't know. I find that as an important distinction because then you start thinking about things in terms of how the season goes and how this fits into your seasonal approach.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And some of it too is just experience. Like some of figuring out what those levels are for different types of players is having reps year over year, week after week. Just
That's why
okay,
it's
this is
nice when a league stays together for a while because then
right.
you kind of do get a sense of what the bids look like.
Yeah, you get a good feel for that in a home league, but in NFPC, you're playing against different people every year, mostly different people. You might get a few overlapping names that were in your league from previous years, but to remember their tendencies and study those tendencies, most people, I think, don't quite have the time for that to actually make it worth their while. As far as where the money went, though, beyond Jack, Christian Encarnacion Strand is back. There were some 12-team leagues where he was available. He was a big pickup in the online championship. Bids as high as $301 out of 1,000. As cheap as $12, but added in over 100 leagues. And I think CES is one of those guys. We still don't know how good he is as a big league hitter because of all the injuries he's dealt with. And it's a smaller track record of playing time than you'd expect. Only 438 plate appearances scattered over parts of 3 seasons now, but he's popped 20 homers. He's had a near 10% barrel rate while putting that together. And as we know, Cincinnati's a great place to hit. So I'm curious where you fall on the, is CES a good player, and how aggressively would you have pursued him in those leagues where he was available?
I think he is a good player. He's above average bat speed and the potential for maybe average contact. So that's a pretty good combination with a nice home park. And I do think that there is a need for his bat and a need for his production and a position for him to play in. Although I think that position may be DH, and that puts a lot of pressure on him to perform with the stick. But that lineup has been sneaky bad in Cincinnati. They need Encarnacion Strand, and with that park being so nice, I'm in. You know, I've picked him up in a couple places in 12-teamers where he was available, and I nursed him through the injury actually, to maybe reap this reward at the end of it. So I think he was worth it. I don't know if he's worth $300, but you know, maybe there's stuff about that league we don't know. Maybe Jack was already gone. You know, maybe, you know, we don't know.
Or a waterfall off of Jack. It was like, I need power. I'm going to get one of these guys, and bid in the 3s on Jack. But
that was a 400. That was a 400 league for Jack.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the most we saw in the OCs was a 570 on Jack.
Jesus.
414 was the top in the main event, with 157 being the minimum. That's the lowest it took in the main event to get Jack Caglione.
I got him at 267 in Barf and 330 in main event.
Yeah, kind of near the mid-range of what people were paying. Probably more typical of a lot of the $1,000 leagues that are out there. Joe Adell getting scooped up again in 12s. I think the interesting thing is that Joe Adell in his current form and like CES trying to dream on what he might be, they're not that different in terms of what they're offering right now. I'd say CES maybe has a little less batting average downside, and Joe Adell, if his leg feels better at some point, might actually be stealing a few bases, whereas CES probably won't do that. But the range on the bids is so different. 1 to 59 on Adell in the online championship compared to that 12 to 301 spread for Christian Encarnacion Strand.
One important thing that happened for Adell is just near the end of last month, he had a position change. And ever since he's made that position change, he's been an everyday player. And he used to be a right fielder, and I think it's a little bit easier as a right fielder to platoon him. So there were some days where Chris Taylor was playing over him. Matthew Lugo played over him. There were other guys that played over him. But since he started playing center field on the 30th of May, he's been in the lineup every day. And it's the 7th spot, the 8th spot in the lineup. And he doesn't, you know, make good contact, won't have a good batting average. But he is going to hit the ball hard, he's going to hit some homers, and he may add some steals, and he's playing every day now. So less of a risk to sit against righties, which would be kind of really tough in these weekly leagues to keep rostering Joe Adell. But it's been a good position change for him. I think also just future wise, it's meant that like maybe he gets this year and next year to play full time, because the center fielder is more valuable. If he's an everyday center fielder for you, you found something, and at least it takes some pressure off of his bat in a way, you know? Yeah. So I think that's really good news for him in keeper leagues. So I think he's in a 12-teamer. Like, you might want to pick up Adell if you're rebuilding.
Yeah, there might be just enough there playing time wise for those tools to come through and at least give you a couple years of above average production in every category, except for probably batting average. I mean, 240, 250 seems doable given how hard he hits the ball, but he's lagged behind that so far this year. A couple pitchers to get to real quick before we sign off. Bryce Elder Bryce Elder for real? Like Bryce Elder? That's what I said when JH and I have a team in the online championship, and he had Bryce Elder on a bid tree. I was like, really? In a 12, we want Bryce Elder? And he made the case. And I mean, 12 Ks last time out against the Giants certainly helps. But the thing that JH pointed out that I had not noticed is that Bryce Elder's stuff started to get better last year. And because he started at a low point, it was easy to miss it.
Yeah, Bryce Elder has been improving his stuff. We got this chart here. He kind of came in and debuted with some good stuff, and then it just really fell down over time. This is a 3-game rolling stuff plus for his career. And when he came back in the second half last year, he's been able to maintain that. Now, he's been maintaining sort of a 90 stuff plus, so it's not amazing, but 90 stuff plus, it's a lot. There's a lot more candidates for, this guy has a bunch of pitches. He has okay stuff. And, he can join the sort of Merrill Kellys of the world, as opposed to being somebody that maybe the stuff just wouldn't even play at the major league level. That was where he was before this. So, some of it has been some changes to the shapes. Some of it has also been velocity over the course of this season. He's gone from sitting 91 to sitting 93. And so, yeah, I think he's serviceable and works, I just don't, I know there's some people being like, oh my God, look at all those strikeouts. You got to go get Bryce Elder. I think he's still someone you want to be careful with on a matchup basis.
Yeah, but a better pitcher than I was probably giving him credit for. And the command being as good as it is goes a long way towards helping it work as well. I still believe Atlanta's a good team too, even with some of the concerns we outlined a little bit earlier. The other
wait real quickly. His next starts are Colorado at home next week.
That was the big one. That was the big one for picking him up right now. Just, well, you can at least use him for that and then decide after that start.
Then I guess Mets at home is the next start. That'll be a little bit harder because the Mets is a decent offense.
Yeah, that one might be. Check carefully to see what your alternatives are and try not to use Bryce Elder for that particular matchup, but you want that spot against the Rockies. Michael McGreevy is the other name I wanted to throw at you. I saw him get picked up in a bunch of leagues. I think that was mostly main event with a high bid capping out at $134. Yeah, he was added in 31 of those leagues. What do you make of McGreevy getting an opportunity in St. Louis?
Yeah, he's similar to Elder in that he's kind of like a sinker sweeper, a guy at his core, but he's got a cutter and a four seam and a curve and change. So he's got a really wide mix with really good command. I think doesn't have great strikeout upside, but with that park, with that mix, if you think Eric Fedde is usable in your league, then Michael McGreevy is. Like he's probably a little better than Eric Fedde, but he's not. I don't think a candidate for he'll be a top 30 starter next year. He just doesn't have the strikeout rate for it.
Yeah, but maybe above the Elder line if we're trying to look at long-term value. I mean, just a low 126 location plus. I think for pitchers with a minimum of 10 innings pitched in the big leagues this year, only Griffin Jacks is higher at a 127. So,
and it's commensurate with his scouting grades and his minor league walk rate. So yeah, it's an extreme command first approach.
Yeah. So maybe you did well if you got McGreevy on the cheap this week. We shall see.
What did I do real quick? I got Rengifo Burrows for a 2-starter. And in TGFBI, I got the Teel. And what else did I do in that one? Sean Manaea for $1, dropping Jose Soriano.
Oh no, you dropped Jose Soriano?
I was just thinking to the future because Jose Soriano had a 1-start week this week, and I had other options where I was like, all these other guys I'd rather have in 1-start weeks. So if I don't start him in 1-start weeks, then I'm only keeping him around for 2-start weeks. Maybe I can actually devote this spot to the future and hope that I get something from Sean Manaea. So Sean Manaea for $1 may look really smart in 2 weeks.
Well, it'll be cheaper than what it'll cost as he gets closer to returning from the IL. Soriano gets a 2-step next week, but it's at the Yankees and then home against the Astros. Like, would you?
That's the other part of it. I was looking at the 2-start being like, is this like a Tyler McGill at Colorado, LA Dodgers 2-start where you're like, that's a 2-start, but I don't want to use it.
Yeah, that's kind of on that side for me, I think, as well. I wouldn't have been all that excited about it. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description. You can find Eno on Bluesky, enosaris.bsky.social. I'm dvr.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.